Alright, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today I just want to go into this article, and this is from the CNN, and it says, thousands protest Netanyahu's plan to weaken Israel's judiciary as president warns of social collapse. So I'm just going to bring out a couple of scriptures, go into this article a little bit. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying straight to the point. And it says, tens of thousands of flag-waving Israelis converged on the nation's parliament Monday amid warnings that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to weaken the judiciary's risks plunging the country into a social collapse. Protesters held signs with messages including "There is no democracy without equality" and "Destroying the country to avoid trial," a reference to the perception that Netanyahu's desire to halt his corruption trials is behind the government's planned judicial reforms. Alphabet, rainbow flags, and a few Palestinian flags were sprinkled among the many Israeli flags in the crowd. Television pictures showed some demonstrations dressed as handmaids from the dystopian book The Handmaid's Tale, in long red dresses with white head coverings. Despite the protest and an impassioned plea from President Isaac Herzog on Sunday night not to start the legislative process, the government began introducing the reform bill in Parliament, the Knesset, on Monday as planned. Herzog warned that Israel is on the brink of constitutional and social collapse and possibly faces a violent collision. Chaotic scenes unfolded within the Knesset's Constitution, Law and Justice Committee meeting on the bill before the protests even got underway, as opposition members of parliament chanted shame. At one point, some of them jumped over tables to yell at coalition members before being removed by security. The bill passed the committee vote and will face a first reading in the full Knesset, likely on Wednesday. Netanyahu's coalition is seeking the most sweeping overhaul of the Israeli legal system since its founding. The most significant of the charges would allow a simple majority in the Knesset to overturn Supreme Court rulings. The reforms also seek to change the way judges are selected and remove government ministries, independent legal advisors, whose opinions are binding. U.S. President Joe Biden, who rarely expresses an opinion on internal Israeli politics, called for a consensus in a statement to the New York Times on Sunday. The genius of American democracy and Israeli democracy is that they are both built on strong institutions and checks and balances on an independent judiciary. Building consensus for fundamental changes is important to ensure that people buy into them so they can be sustained. I'm just going to read, that, this is just a picture of, the demonstrations that, those so-called ish people, are over there doing, because to the book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 15. And I'm going to start at verse 14. Woe to them, Slakia, woe to the world and them that dwell therein. For the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hand. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. A man shall desire to go into a city, and shall not be able. For because of the pride, the cities shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. A man shall have no pity on it. Slakia, a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy and spoil. Slakia, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread for great tribulation. Slakia. Basically, it's pretty much describing the time of Jacob's trouble, because ultimately it is for, the 2/3 of the nation of Israel. But ultimately the entire world is going to go through Jacob's trouble, because it's going to be a time since, was never seen upon the earth. But, these uprisings and seditions and insurrections, it's just a precursor, It's just a build up to what's getting ready to take place upon the earth, So I'm going to go to the book of Jeremiah. Chapter 30 and verse 6, and it says, Ask ye now, and see whether a man doth travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins, as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. Excuse me, Slakia. But yes, it's going to be a very terrible time upon the earth, A very, very terrible time. Because, there's nations are going to, Slakia, nations are going to fight against other nations, There's going to be, riots, race wars, famines. It's going to be a very terrible time upon the earth. So terrible that, Michael the Archangel is going to have to step in on behalf of, the elect of the nation of Israel. And it's the book of Daniel, chapter 12 and verse 1, and it says, And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as was never since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And yes, that book, meaning the book of life, that the elect are written in the book of life, and only the elect are going to be delivered, during the time of Jacob's trouble, and ultimately from, that second death, which is the fire from those ICBM missiles. Only the elect is going to make it through these troubling times and that destruction to come, But that's the time that we're coming into, That's the time that we're still vastly approaching, the time of Jacob's trouble. But before, Jacob's trouble takes place, Revelation chapter 13 and verse 16, which is the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is the RFID CHIP, that has to be made mandatory. It has to be fully implemented in order for, these certain prophecies to take place, But ultimately, that's the time that we're still approaching, It's going to be a very, very terrible time upon this earth, it's going to be hell on earth, literally, you know. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Akakwadash. I like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I say Shalom.